I went in an Adam Tarnow wormhole and just,
Uh-oh.
went back into, so I mean, I got into to the doctorate degree from Disney, which we're going to get into.
That's a
But
thing.
what is, so all of this, I mean, you've had so many experiences, and so you're developing leaders now, and that's that's what you're doing. How did it, I'm always interested when someone says, okay, I have all this experience and now I'm going to take this risk of just doing it out on my own. So you had so much organizational experience. What was, I want to hear, maybe first I want to hear about that jumping off point, and then we can go back to what brought you there. But what was that jumping off point like, then the risk of saying, I'm going to go do this on my own?
I was close to leaving the Watermark staff at the end of 2018.
Okay.
Then our buddy Jonathan Bacluta made his transition down to Waco. So I decided, all right, I'm not going to make my transition right now. There was another organization that I was interviewing with, and all that stuff all worked out. It was a better decision for them and for me to just go ahead and stay. So the seeds were planted around 2018 that I just felt like my time on staff at Watermark was up, and I don't know how else to describe it. And I was ready for another chapter. And then by the end of 2019, my wife and I had decided that 2020 was going to be the last year that I'd be on staff. So I was going to be making some transition. We had just circled probably by the end of the year, by the end of 2020.
Yeah.
Nobody knew anything about anything
Isn't
at that point.
Isn't that so funny to think back on, like, at the end of 20, like making plans for 2020, just how
oh, we just booked this great spring break and it was going to be amazing. Like we had the best March ever all planned out.
Yeah, exactly right.
And, you plan, but man, your steps are directed otherwise sometimes. But so then probably end of January 2020, I get approached, and this is, a little weird to say, but I was approached with kind of a promotion, which is always weird on a church staff to think about promotions, but there was basically more responsibility. Like what you've been doing, we want to give you some more responsibility. Take a couple of weeks to think about it and let us know if this is something you want to do. And that really forced my hand. So we had gone into that year knowing that was probably going to be the last year. And now I've got my bosses going, we want to give you more responsibility. What do you think? And because these are also my friends, I couldn't just be like, sure, I'll take the job, and then in 6 months or 3 months turn around and quit. So I told them, I just said, I don't think I can take this role, and here's why. Because I think my next career step is actually not here. It's going to be doing something else. I've had this dream of going to do what I'm doing now. It's only getting stronger, and I feel like it's gotten to the point now where it'll feel disobedient if I don't do it, and I'll regret it if I don't do it. So I just need to take this risk right now. And then we worked on a timeline. They just said, okay, well, when do you want to go? And we agreed. And again, this is January, early February. We agreed that I would leave in May, at the end of May. And so we told the staff. I started to make some progress on getting AdamTarnow.com set up, started to put a business plan together. And I'll never forget, it was probably end of February now, and we're starting to hear about this virus, and it's starting to come. You just watch this wave coming. And I remember I recorded a video that I was going to use on my website, and the basic message was something like, online training and virtual training is okay, but nothing beats getting in a room with a group of people and having a shared learning experience with your peers.
Everybody sneezing on each other. There's nothing like it. Yeah, exactly.
The buffet at lunch where nobody washes their hand before. That's a learning experience. That's a team building experience. And so,
oh my gosh.
I remember then, mid-March hits, and I call that my video editor. I was like, I'm going to pay you whatever you quoted me, but delete all of that. That message is not going out.
Oh my gosh.
And then it was just nuts. I mean, my job got as busy as it ever did at church, because I still was full-time employed. I still loved the mission. And we were now transitioning from being a church to essentially becoming a television station. And that was the team I was guiding and leading at the time was we were the ones executing on all of that. And so long story short, it ended up being about June. I ended up extending 2 weeks, and I left June 15th. And so we're closing in on, 3 years.
Did you have any epiphanies about yourself as a leader during that time? Was there anything that stood out to you that I'm sure you stepped into a lot of that because that's when the situation arises, you were there. But did you learn anything, personally about yourself as a leader during that time?
Yeah. And it's interesting you say the word epiphany. I was actually journaling on that word today. And so I have been very impacted. I first learned of this idea of how to talk about an epiphany from A.J. Harper's book, Write a Must Read. And she was very much influenced by Stephen Pressfield. So I was reading Stephen Pressfield's book, Turning Pro, or going back through it this morning to find some things. Just there's so many great journal writing prompts in that book. And so that's some of what I do in the morning. I'll just go back and read a couple pages. And his definition of an epiphany is not when you realize something amazing about yourself. It's when you realize you're at the end of yourself. And so an epiphany, in the way he would describe it, is it is a gut-wrenching process for a leader or a person to go through, because you realize I'm not all that. And that, when you get to the end of yourself, is when you see this other path to go walk on. And so, yes, there were epiphanies, Joey, but they were not like, I realized I had this amazing teaching gift and I was great talking about leadership. And so I just realized I got to go be me, right? It really wasn't that. In some ways, if you really want to get into it, I realized I wasn't cut out to be a pastor. I was kind of at the end of myself from that, because I was on staff at a church. And so there were some gut-wrenching aspects of this that I had to come to grips with. I don't think this is where I want to spend my professional life anymore. I don't think I'm cut out for this. I don't think I've got the makeup and the personality to do this. And so, there's a lot more there that I could explain. That's probably beyond the scope of this podcast. But yeah, there were definitely some of those things. And then obviously, if we do talk about the natural epiphany and where things go, and you do see some good things too. And it was, I like to write, I like to research, I like to teach. And I had been doing some of this leadership development on the side when I was on staff, and I candidly felt like there was a market, because obviously it's got to be a market to be a business. Otherwise it's just a hobby. And I didn't want it just to be a hobby. I needed to make some money.
That concept of epiphany is interesting, because as you're describing it, you get to the end of yourself, you realize you're not all that. But what that seems to do is it opens up, it expands your mind to where you realize that there's more than just your current context. So I remember I was in a pivotal decision probably 10 years ago in my career. And I called my dad and I was talking through, here's my option A, here's my option B. And he said basically, it's like, what if he goes, just consider for a second if there is an option C. And I thought it was those two things. And it's an interesting thing when you expand out of your mind to where you just have to, you realize, okay, my back's up against the wall and I have to do something different than in my current context. That seems like an epiphany could land in a painful, expansive way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting as we think about, different relationships that we're in right now with people who are going through hard times. There is something very interesting. One way to look at that hard time or that difficult decision or that stressful decision is you're in the midst of an epiphany, and epiphanies can be messy, and they're not very clean oftentimes. And there's some, but I like what Pressfield goes on to say, where it produces very interesting. He says it produces shame, but he doesn't talk about shame as like, shoo, get that away. He says shame, if it runs its course, will produce will, like willpower, where you finally get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you say, I now have the will to start moving in this direction. And that's where you can get your courage and your resolve to continue moving forward, which you had alluded to that of when you go out and take a risk like what I did, leaving this very comfortable 10, 20-year career of being a CPA. It was very risky to leave being a CPA to go on staff at a church. And then I was very comfortable there to take that risk in the middle of a pandemic to go out and start a business. That my buddy bought me a gift right when the first day of my business, and in the card he said, I don't know if you're the dumbest guy I've ever met or one of the smartest.
I like how he said, they said you're either the dumbest or one of the smartest. You're definitely not the smartest, but you may be one of them. But you're very possibly the dumbest. Yeah, not one of the dumbest, but the dumbest.
You're in the conversation. So that's, that I think if I can look back on it now, I would have never been able to use that language in the beginning when I was going through it, but now I got a little bit of separation from it. And I think there is some of that epiphany cycle. If Pressfield's right, let's just, we're just using his model for this, that there was kind of a coming to the end of yourself, a little bit of shame and embarrassment and fear. But then if you let that run its course, there can be a resolve and a will where you go, but I'm moving forward. And that was that's a little bit of my story.
I love that thought, because when I think of shame, I also think of you being exposed. And so, which is, you start getting into vulnerability there, just exposing the, your own weaknesses. And so in doing that, that has to go say something like, I develop leaders. That's a big statement. I mean, you hear leadership development. That's a big statement. Like, well, I mean, the immediate question is, why are you qualified to do that? So, right. And not you, Adam, but like anybody who says something like that, that's a pretty bold thing. Like you're saying, you're making a statement about yourself.
Yeah.
Now, the good thing about that is that influences people's opinion. Just hearing that, to be like, oh, this guy must be a good leader. How did you fall into in leadership development, which is a broad category? What is I know you talk a lot about emerging leaders too. And then, so what is it where have you focused your efforts in terms of developing leaders? And I will ask you the question, what makes you qualified to do that?
Yeah. Well, do you remember there was an old Super Bowl commercial years ago? I think you can go find it on YouTube. It was monster.com, and it had a bunch of kids, maybe elementary school age kids, sarcastically talking about what they wanted to be when they grew up. And the basic message behind that commercial was, hey, little kid, you never said you wanted to be where you are now. And I just remember there was one kid that just said, I can't wait to work my way up to middle management.
I remember that commercial.
And it's really funny. So that is what my entire professional career has been. I have spent 25 years in middle management. That's just true. Okay. Yeah. I've led teams, but the teams have been in a larger organization where I have always had, except for the first couple of years right out of college, where it was just low man on the org chart, low person on the org chart. The rest of my time, I've had teams that I've led, and I've had a boss, and I've had bosses' bosses, and I've had this whole thing. And I go around and I teach now this thing called the valley. That's really what it is. It's this valley where you've got the hill of ignorance on one side and Mount Authority on the other side. And you start on the hill of ignorance, and then when you get your first promotion, you actually don't you go up the org chart, but you go down into a valley, and you stay in that valley for a long period of time, a lot longer than you want to. And then you may be able to make it over to Mount Authority. But in the valley is one of the hardest seasons of anybody's career, because you've got pressure from above, from your boss and your boss's bosses, and boards and all that kind of stuff that you have to report to. And then you got pressure from below, coming from your team, who needs your help and they need your guidance. You have to deal with everybody in the organization. You have to navigate relationships with senior leaders, with peers, with your team, vendors, customers, and you just get thrown into this. And I had to figure out so many things the hard way, because there was such a lack of training at times on how to navigate the valley. And in somebody's survey that I just recently read on this said they had surveyed 17,000 leaders as a part of their leadership development consulting firm. And of the 17,000, they found that the average age of the person going through and receiving their first round of leadership training, their average age was 42.
Oh my gosh.
But the average age when they first became a supervisor was age 30. Wow. And so you've got this gap. You've got these middle managers that are navigating this valley and have this 12-year gap of receiving almost no training. And there's just the way my brain works. I was just going out and trying to figure out how to navigate the valley on my own. And I developed some content and some models and some ways to think through it, that now I get the opportunity to go and work with middle managers almost every day. And so that's really the core demographic that I'm working with, are these middle managers who feel like they're in the valley. They feel overwhelmed. They feel hopeless. I mean, then if you're in the valley for a long time and you have no training and you're navigating all this and all these problems roll downhill and they all collect in the valley, this is where you get burnout and frustration and cynicism, and people give up, and quiet quitters and all that kind of stuff. So I think what qualifies me to do it is I've been there for 25 years. Yeah. I've never been on Mount Authority, never.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying, but I've had some success while navigating the valley. And now I'm getting to work with others, and I'm getting to see other successful, leaders that are navigating the valley. And so I think that's what gives me some moral authority in some ways, if that sounds weird. And then just I've seen some things and can help people navigate that really difficult season of their career.
It seems like an equally good opportunity to, I mean, that seems like that's an organizational breakdown. If that age 30 is when people become supervisors and they don't get training until 12 years later on average, that seems like that's a huge opportunity. So are you also educating organizations on, hey, you have to develop your leaders?
Yes. But it's the important, not urgent. So I can understand the pressure they feel, because leadership development is a really difficult thing to show or return on that investment. So in some ways, and this is really interesting, a lot of times if an organization will hire me to come in and train their leaders, really it's because there's so many murmurings from below of going, we want to be developed, develop us. So the 30 to 42-year-olds are going, how do I navigate this valley? You've got to do something to help me. And so sometimes it's like, well, something's better than nothing. So come in and just spend some time with them. And I'm, grossly overstating all of that. But there is some of that where it's important. It's not urgent. Sometimes they're hiring me to come in because it's just let's do something. Let's just pour into them. That's going to be better than nothing. But I understand why it is a difficult thing to spend money on. It's, in theory, we know we need more training. I have been in those rooms where leaders are talking about their team, and it's like, God, if they were just trained better. But then when it actually gets down to it, on, are you going to do the training? What training? How much time? How much money? It's a hard decision to make. So I can empathize with that. But yes, you're right. It is a breakdown. It is a breakdown for sure. Yeah. And I think it's a huge risk for a lot of organizations as well.
It's funny because I was thinking about it. I was thinking it's a bet that the company's placing. I'm betting that this investment we're putting into somebody is going to do well, but that almost looks at it on an individual basis versus you look at it culturally and holistically. It's a bigger gamble. It's a bigger bet to not invest in that sort of program, even if that means that not all those people make it 10 more years in the organization. It's still what a huge bet that you're placing, that not investing in it is better than investing in it.
I think what you're seeing, maybe about a year ago, Amazon threw a commercial up there that was talking about an ex-employee. And so it was somebody that started with Amazon, and then they wanted to become a medical technician, and Amazon paid for them to go to that school so they could become a medical technician. And that was the whole 30-second commercial telling that person's story. And I remember looking at my wife going, did you see what they just did? That's pretty amazing. So yes, they reminded us that Amazon exists. And so we pull out our app and maybe, we buy something, but they also, we know they had some employment brand issues that they needed to try to clean up a little bit. But that employment brand really is a thing that more and more organizations are starting to wise up to, of going, not just a market brand on how we can attract clients, but we've got this employment brand. How can we continue to attract talent? And obviously I'm not in Amazon. I don't know any senior leaders over there. I don't know what the heart behind it all was, but I think for our conversation today, and probably the people that listen to this podcast, regardless if somebody stays or goes after you train them, I think that's just the right thing to do, is to develop the whole person while they're there. And so if you can see, I think it's pretty powerful. Casey Graham was probably the first one that shared this idea with me, where he had this basic thought of, I want to be the best stepping stone in somebody's career that I possibly can be, which I felt was a really healthy attitude. And it would be interesting to look at the longevity on what his turnover is like at his company and things like that, to know, are people staying because they're so cared for and they feel so poured into? But even if they go, I think that's still a noble effort to know that you poured into somebody and you made them better. So when they look back at their time with you, they said, that's one of the best jobs I ever had.
Well, and think about a guy like that who makes that statement. He probably enjoys his life a lot more. He just knowing you have a lot of people who are grateful for you, because you're looking out for their future. There's nothing better than that. I mean, I'm sure you've had this over the years, where someone has called you, and maybe even a memory you don't have yourself, but they say, a decade ago, you gave me this piece of advice, or you looked out for me, or I was going through this. That's a very gratifying thing. It just makes you enjoy your own life better by doing that. It's a little, again, it's back to a risk. It's a risk that you're doing something, risking losing somebody, but it comes back to you and you just enjoy your life better. If that's the only benefit, it's probably worth it.
Absolutely. I think we can learn something from colleges and universities if you really think about it, right? They have a recruiting process to get new students. Then you stick around about 4 years, maybe 5, and then you leave, but the relationship doesn't end.
Yeah.
And so it's not like, well, good, get out of here, right? Go on out there to life, whatever it is. But no, they stay in touch with you because you never know what that relationship, what kind of fruit will come from that relationship down the road. So it's not just then your alumni start having kids and they come back, or there's just donations, or it's just you're bragging on the school and that word of mouth, as we talked about earlier, that leads other people there. There's something with that alumni network that I think we could all learn from on that. So they gave us their best, right, as we were being trained while there, and then they expect us to leave, but they want to keep a relationship with us. There's something we can maybe learn from that.
I like that. And it's people accept that because it's designed to be temporary. You just know. And so if you were to look at that, I mean, I think about even us in his organization, what if we just looked at, hey, this person's going to leave at some point, so how can we help set them up best where they can come back to us? And great organization. My brother Jacob he's a partner at Ernst & Young, and they're very good about helping place, because those people who leave become clients, and
they do.
You could either fight the attrition or you could embrace the attrition and help to Casey's point, be a good stepping stone for them. What's some of the stuff you talk with those people about, the people who may be in the valley? What are some of those things? How do you guide them? What are some of maybe the common themes you see from them? And then how do you help coach them along? And what's maybe your long-term objective with those people?
Yeah. And this is some stuff that I've been working on recently with a new book, or what I hope will be a new book with all of this, Joey, because I believe in this so much. And I really do think that it is possible to thrive in the valley, that it doesn't all have to be gloom and doom and darkness and cynicism. I do believe it is possible to thrive, but I think there's really, Simon Sinek calls it a transition. I like to think about it as a mindset shift. So there's got to be a shift, and you've got to start thinking about your job and yourself a different way. And so I see three basic shifts that need to happen. And the first one is a shift in identity, that you need to view yourself not just as a manager, but as a leader. The second one is a shift in control, that you've got to really believe that you're not a victim to circumstances, but you have a sense of personal agency. There's always something you can do. There's always something you can control. And then the last one would be this shift in what are your key skills right now that are going to lead you to success. And it's got to shift from technical to relational. And so I think if you can think about yourself as I'm a leader, and I have a sense of personal agency, and my number one skill that I need to develop while navigating here in the valley is my relational savvy. Those are the three basic mindset shifts that need to happen, where I think that's where if you don't make those shifts, then I think the valley stays dark. If you can make those shifts, I think the sun can start to come in, hope can start to arise, and you can start to realize, okay, it's possible to thrive here. And it doesn't all have to be doom and gloom.
I'm sure it changes for every client of yours, but what's the win? Is for them, because that's some of that could be quantitative, but I would assume that a lot of that becomes qualitative, just for them to feel hopeful. I mean, what is the win there generally?
Well, if they're going to feel that hopefulness, then I think they're going to be more engaged.
Right?
Yeah, that I do like. I believe. I'm skipping the name is losing me right now. Who does all the engagement studies? Oh gosh, we'll come to that name here in a moment. But they're the ones that are doing, like, putting out all the studies on this. And I love their definition of what employee engagement means. And it really is trying to measure a person's emotional commitment to the organization and its goals. And so when people are all in, right, to Rob Dabo Sweeney's famous phrase from my Clemson Tigers, thank you very much. Right. But when people are all in, that's when teams are really performing at their best. So I think effectiveness and results are really the win with all of this, because most organizations don't need people that are just punching the clock and doing the bare minimum. They want people to be all in. That's where creative ideas are going to come from. That's where deadlines are going to be met, products going to be shipped, and we're going to be able to be resilient and pivot and figure out all the new stuff that we need to do based on the changing circumstances that are always heading our way. So I would think the biggest win is just an engaged leader. And I do really, I mean, that research on how much of engagement really falls on the team leader's shoulders is, I mean, it's pretty convincing to me. And so you get a team leader that feels hope, and then I think there's going to be more engagement.
And then engagement, and then it's purposeful. Then you feel a sense of purpose. People go and feel a sense of purpose, and then it's just so funny how all of those things connect there, and that sense of purpose is very powerful, right?
Yep. It's Barna. Barna did all the research.
Barna, yeah, sure.
That's it. So, yeah.
I do want to hear about the doctorate degree from Disney University.
I'm surprised that we're 10, 15 minutes into this and you haven't really brought it up. I mean, usually that's where people want to start, but whatever, Joe. You run your own podcast your way.
Right. I like to make people wait for it just a little bit. You know what I mean? They want to hear it. I know they do. We got to keep them around.
Okay, so Walt Disney World. I went for the very first time to Walt Disney World when I was, I think, 17 years old with my family. We went down there and spent a Christmas, and man, it was life changing. I'm very secure in my 47-year-old self to say that it was a life-changing experience. And I walked away from there going, I don't know if I've ever felt as, happiest place on earth like I felt those few days when we were on that property. And then there was just this thing in me saying, I want to go work there. I want to be a part of creating that magic and that happiness. And so that was just one of these dreams in the back of my mind that a 17-year-old says after they're driving home on I-95 up to DC, and they're just bored. And so I get to Clemson, and this was walking through the post office, and there's all these flyers sitting up there at the post office talking about the Walt Disney World College program, and they're going to show up for interviews. And I was like, what is this? And do a little bit of research, and come to find out they hire college students all the time. They've got this program. And so I think it was right after it was the first semester of my sophomore year. I applied. I got an offer, but I turned it down. I wasn't ready to take a semester off of school yet, and did it again after the spring semester of my sophomore year and got another offer to do it. And so I said yes. And so I went down there for 7 months.
Wow.
And I was an accounting major, and so they had these specialty accounting internships. And when I think about what creates the magic at Disney World, I automatically think accounting.
Sure.
That's where all the magic starts. And
just the debits, the credits. Sure. Yes. Yeah. Oh.
And especially entering non-cash transactions into the general ledger every day, like I did. So, So that's what I got to go down there and do. And it was amazing. So I got to spend 7 months, and while we were down there as part of the college program, you get to go through Disney University, and you get to do all this training. And there were these 10 classes in Disney management. And if you went to all 10 classes and did not miss one, they gave you a doctorate. So it's essentially a perfect attendance record.
All right. Give us what are a couple things that people may not know about Disney? Like, I mean, the tunnel, I hear the tunnel system and all that. Is it the tunnels?
So, the tunnel system. So it was on swampland. And so Disney really had so much foresight that what they did is they realized they couldn't build the Magic Kingdom at ground level. And so they needed to fill up the ground, right? They needed to create more ground. So they dug, if you've been to Walt Disney World, right there in front of the Magic Kingdom, and all the hotels are around it. There's, I think it's called Seven Seas Lagoon or something like that. There's a big body of water right there. That is a hole that they dug. And then where the Magic Kingdom is, they put all the dirt over there, and they created the tunnel system. Then they put the dirt on top of that when they dug the hole, put it there, and then they built the Magic Kingdom on top of that. So the Magic Kingdom is not at ground level. The tunnel system is a little bit above ground level, and that was the foresight that they had. Amazing. And so it was all because of excellence, right? His achieving, being intentional with his excellence, and going, I don't want somebody in a costume from Tomorrowland to ever show up in over here in the frontier world. And so they're going to walk underground. I don't want people, the way they move the trash around, all the wires and the plumbing. If a pipe ever bursted, they didn't want to dig up the asphalt. So that's why you can go underneath. It's genius when you really think about it. It's so efficient.
It is amazing. It's I had an epiphany. Well, maybe I didn't have an epiphany.
Maybe it
I had a
wasn't.
realization.
See, now it messes with your
I know.
head.
I had a realization whenever I was at Disney World a few years ago with my kids. My kids were young. We were watching the fireworks at Magic Kingdom at night, and it was this amazing display, right? I mean, it's a world-class fireworks show. And I had this realization, they do this every night.
Every night.
This fireworks show every night. And what it told me was it seems to me, they treat every day as if it's the only day that someone will ever be there.
That's well said, yeah.
It's an amazing thought, and you just think, okay, this is their one chance. We have one shot with this person for their entire life that they're going to be at Disney World once. So let's make it the most unique experience.
For sure.
What an amazing thing they do.
It really is. When was the last time you were there?
It's been probably over 5 years ago.
Okay.
So I haven't seen any of the Avatar Land or the Star Wars or anything like that. So
amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. We went down. It was the third time the government gave us money, that last stimulus check, where we and a couple friends, a couple families, I called them up and said, you guys want to go be good Americans and put this money back in the economy down there in Orlando? And so we went down there in February of 21. And just had a blast. I mean, we even had to wear masks, and not everything was open, and we still just had so much fun. But we got to do the Star Wars stuff and see Avatar Land, and also went over to Universal and saw the Harry Potter stuff. It was a lot of fun. They just do such a great job.
It's amazing. It really is incredible.
Yeah.
I want to talk. You mentioned being all in earlier.
Yeah.
I want to talk about The Edge, the book you wrote, The Edge, how to stand out by showing you're all in, which is a great book. I have an autographed copy in my office. And I love it. I mean, I love, and we'll get into the acronym, and I ask authors this a bunch, this vulnerability of writing a book. We alluded to it a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
What is that process like? One, the discipline of writing it, but then, hey, world, here you go, review it and comment all you want.
Yeah. Nobody prepared me for that. I mean, I really, I thought when the day the book released on September 13th of 22, that was the finish line. And imagine if you're out running and you realize I'm just running a half marathon, and you get to 13.2 and you realize you accidentally signed up for a full marathon. Like what would you feel in that moment? That's pretty much what I felt as I realized, oh, this was just the beginning. And so it was really hard. I mean, emotionally, some things that I felt in those first few weeks afterwards were very surprising. It was I felt embarrassed a little bit, very vulnerable, and it was very surprising to me. It was so. I mean, I was used to taking content and putting it out there to the world with blogs and podcasts, or if I go teach somewhere, or over at the church preach a sermon. I was used to that stuff being out there, but those were a little bit more flash in the pan. You just kind of do it, and then by tomorrow, everybody forgets it. The book felt very permanent. It's always out there on Amazon. There's always a sales ranking associated with it. There's always those reviews that are out there, and so it was difficult.
Which is funny because the book is about the emotional commitment of being all in. I mean, so I'm sure you were challenged in one way, just the emotional battle of doing that. You talked about writing a second book, so clearly you're insane to want to subject yourself to it again. But what are some of the things that, I mean, I'm sure just that awareness is one thing that's helped, but how would you, what would be the advice you'd give yourself on September 12th, 2022, the day before it came out?
That's a good question. That really is. I think it would just be, this is a long process. So tomorrow and the first month and sales, you really, that old advice that we get sometimes, if you buy a stock, like, don't look at the stock market every day, right? You don't need to see those ups and downs every day. Just look at it once a month or once a quarter. I probably would give myself that advice. Just the success of this, whatever that is in quotes, the success of this is not going to be determined in the first 30 days. And so, in the first 30 days, the sales, though, that still was our best 30 days of sales, but there was, it was a little bit lower than we expected. And I don't know why. I don't know why we thought two guys that have never written a book, that don't have a massive platform, that suddenly Lencioni was going to be inviting us on their podcast. I don't know where that came from. Right. But that's just that. But there was there was these like, maybe I wonder. It's so much to talk about with all this, but there's Jerry Seinfeld and Alec Baldwin on one of their Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. And I write about it in the book, talk about this thing called the Show Business Commission, which is basically this mythical group of people out there that just search and scour the world for all the unfound talent, and they come and they carry you to the land of success. And I put it in the book of going, reject the notion of the Show Business Commission, feel your sense of personal agency. You've got to work at it to be able to achieve any success. But for crying out loud, I still was believing that the you build it, they will come, and the show business agency would show up, or the Show Business Commission would show up and carry you to success. And it's depressing when it doesn't. And so you just got to be ready for the long haul.
What's funny about whenever you, I think for me personally, whenever I think about difficulty and overcoming difficulty, I think about it in almost romantic terms. Like it's going to be this heroic moment where I overcome that, I don't need I'm going to overcome it. But then when you get in it, sometimes it just sucks. Like it's just like, or it's even like, sometimes just boring, or it's tedious, and you're just like, that's not, you're not prepared for the tedium. You're ready to like, suit up and get your sword and go out and fight. But it's not like that at all. It's just like sitting in a dimly lit room, just figuring out, what do I do now? Except for like refresh to see if we've sold some more. Right.
Yeah. Which is, I'm trying to get that through to my sons right now, a 14-year-old, 12-year-old, because they'll watch Mr. Beast. And they'll go, man, we probably need to start a YouTube channel. I bet we get like 100 million views tomorrow. Why would we not do that? And I'm like, guys, that's not the way it works. What we don't know is all the years of somewhat average videos that he made, and he kept at it. It is all of this success or any achievement that you want. I don't know if you feel this, and you and Heath, as you probably have felt this at times with Aro, and that is, it just feels like you're surrounded by dead weight. And you are the only one who can move it. And nobody is sitting there going, can I carry some dead weight for you? You've got to do it. You've just got to do it every day. There is something, if you want to achieve something, or just even get a project done, somebody has got to carry that dead weight. There's just nobody around who does it for you. And so that I think that's what when we see all the success that's out there, that's a good reminder for us of like, we didn't see all the dead weight they carried to get that great YouTube video or get that book out there.
It feels often like I'm the dead weights, and the rest of the team, Heath and Clay and Rich and Caitlin and Brandon, they had just texted me
and said, hey, use that dead weight analogy. And so I got it. Just let them know I got it.
I hear you're talking with dead weight today. That's just what they call me, is dead weight. So the thing I love about The Edge is it hits on a concept that is very, very important, but then it gives you the breakdown. It gives you the form. The Edge is the acronym. Can you talk to us? Can you walk us through the acronym there?
Yeah, it's an acronym. So how do you get an edge in your career? Well, energy, diligence, growth, endurance. So the positive energy that you bring as many days a week as you possibly can, the diligence that you show, which is that care and persistence towards your work, the growth, so the hunger for progress and development that you embody. And then endurance is just the ability to bounce back from adversity, setbacks, hardships. As anybody in any career ever knows, it's never just up and to the right on a constant upswing. There are always ups and downs. And so you can start to do those four things. You're going to really develop a very strong personal brand, which is incredibly important. And so you want to be known as somebody who is energetic, very diligent, always willing to grow, and both personally and want to see the organization grow. And then you have endurance. You don't give up when things get hard, and you don't wallow in pity if you swing and miss. You just keep going. Those are some great characteristics that will really set you apart. That is the upside of these bad employee engagement statistics. Is the bar's really low right now for a young professional. And so here's 4 simple things you can do to start standing out.
Of those 4, which one of those did you struggle with most after you launched the book?
Talking about, or just living?
Maybe living.
Living.
Going through what you just described, which of those 4 became most challenging?
The chapter on optimism, so that's in the energy section. That for me is definitely the one that was most challenging to write. still continues to be one that I think about, because even this morning, as I mentioned when I was journeying, even this morning, there was such a tendency in me to want to go to this negative doom and gloom, look at all the bad things. And I wasn't even reading headlines, right? Like, this is just things I'm making up in my mind about the business and where my website is and what that one page looks like. I mean, it was just like, pessimism is so easy and negativity is so easy. So that one continues to be a challenge in my personal life, and one that I've got to constantly remind myself of, that optimism is a choice. It's not a feeling. And when you can, back to a little bit of what I was talking about in the Valley, if you can remember your personal sense of agency, that you do have some control, and really just focus on making the best next step you possibly can, that will help you maintain an optimistic attitude, or you're living as if you believe tomorrow is going to be better, which the thing about tomorrow is absolutely nobody knows. So the pessimist and the optimist are really both the same. Yeah. They don't know. They're guessing.
Oh, that's so interesting.
But I think the optimist, and the decisions they make at times, and there is, I know, a movement out there of toxic optimism, where it can go too far. And I'm not talking about that, but I do think when I choose to make decisions believing in what I would characterize as optimistic life, not only are they better decisions, like they work out, but I think I'm a little easier to be around too.
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah. And Jeannie Stevens talks about says, don't live in a not yet, because that not yet is usually worse than your now. So we're living we're living a fully formed story that's worse. And you just, even if it doesn't turn out even if you're optimistic and it doesn't turn out as good as you think it might, at least you weren't miserable waiting until that thing happened. Right. Yeah. And it does go back to, I know you right after the chapter on optimism is the chapter on gratitude and being grateful. Those two are so tied together. I feel like I again and again and again keep getting reminded of how important gratitude is.
Yes. And that is, I mean, listen, if there's a young leader or somebody in the first 2 years of their career right now that's listening, you just want a very, very fast thing to do. You don't even have to go buy the book. Just start telling people around you, thank you. Right. And be specific. Like, thanks for teaching me that thing the other day, or thanks for being gracious with me even when I messed up on that thing, or thanks for having drinks in the break room. Well, whatever it is, just starting to communicate some level of gratitude, that is it's going to feel weird to people. They're going to go, what's wrong? Yeah. Like, what's wrong? Because just nobody does it, or very few. I shouldn't say nobody. It just seems it's such an easy way to stand out.
It's such an easy way to stand out. It makes that person feel good about themselves, which then when someone feels good about themselves around you, they feel good about you. So they have positive associations with you. So it continues to come back to you. And then if you do that in your marriage too, or you do that with your kids, if you find those areas to be grateful for, that's a freaking power tool right there. That's something that will transform your relationships. It's an amazing thing. You're a fan of Severance. That was your favorite show of 2022, the TV show Severance.
Have you watched it?
Oh, bro. That show is so good. I thought that the humor is weird and dark and quirky.
Yep.
It's like they're like, what is it? Their waffle celebrations or whatever. It's so good. That show, I love that show. It's I saw that was on your favorite things of 2022. And
yes. I mean, I don't know who told me about it, but then you watch one episode and it was, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
Could not wait to watch the next episodes. I say it's a mix between Lost meets The Office. Maybe. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's got a little bit of that spooky, what's going on?
Yeah.
But then but it's at work, and just the premise. And especially with what I do in leadership development, that premise lends a lot of great conversations on a long training day. If you just want a little break, like, okay, would you get this procedure if you could, where the work self didn't remember the home self and the home self didn't remember the work self? And it's a fun conversation.
It's so funny. How do you think your boy in your transition over the last couple of years? So your sons are 14 and 12. And so it's been 3 years, about 2.5 years since you've made the transition. How do you think they're going to look back and describe this time in their lives growing up?
What a great question, Joey. I mean, we try to talk about it a little bit now. And again, they're boys, number one, and they're 12 and 14, number two. So there's the words we get out of them. I think they're encouraged by it. and they would say, Dad seems different. And they don't mean that in a bad way. That first, probably about the middle of 21, there were quite a few people that knew me well. They were like, something different about you. Like, what is it? And I'm like, I don't. Is it I'm smiling? I think I'm smiling. I think that's what it is.
That's what this is. What is it? What is it called when you're
it goes
corners
up,
of your lips go up?
Yeah. So I think it's that. So I think there's that. I mean, obviously, and it's just not fair to compare what I'm doing now to. I chose a financial. I knew that there was a financial decision to be on staff at a church. So obviously, there's a little bit more breathing room that they can feel from that perspective. That I know at 12 and 14 they like that, but what I really want them to know, if we were to jump forward there, is I hope it's an example of courage for them, because I'm limited in my ability to show courage to them because I hate being outside, and so I never hunt.
God, you were talking to a kindred spirit right now. Go on.
So it's like I don't lift a lot of weights. I don't go out and hunt. I'm probably never going to buy a Jeep. I don't want to camp. I don't know how to whittle anything. So how can I show them any ability to be courageous? And so hopefully this mental courage, or some of this financial courage, I guess, the financial risk that we took, hopefully it's just an example for them to go, okay, that's a way to live. That I hope they're seeing that.
It's such what an amazing thing to teach them, is that people get stuck in this, like, oh no, this is what I'm, so you said you're 47, so you're about 44 at the time. Like, that's, we're here we are, but no, saying like, no, you can pivot. That pivot, what a great thing for them to see. I'm excited for them as they continue to just see what is possible. And that's neat. I think that's
fun.
cool.
It's fun. I appreciate you asking that. That's a good question. And it'll be fun tonight when I have dinner with them.
Yeah.
Just even go, hey, I was asked this today. What do you guys think? So that's a really great question. I appreciate that.
What are some ways in the last couple of years, just from a marriage perspective, what are some things you and your wife have done to make sure you stay on the same page, that you are aligned, that you stay current with each other, and you're not kind of two ships passing in the night?
Yeah. Really, it is the face-to-face conversation that it's just, that has to happen for us. If it doesn't, then that's when we do start to get a little cranky. And so, I mean, there's nothing magical about it. I mean, a lot of times, especially when the kids, the strangest thing for me about having, or not the strangest, one of the strangest things about having older kids is the night is gone, because the kids are up there. Totally. I mean, there's many times I'm going to bed before them. So that's strange, because now it's all family time at night, where before you get them down at 7:30, and then Jackie and I could hang out and talk, and then we could kind of have another night, after they would go to bed. So now a lot of the face-to-face conversations can happen during the day, and it may be just a phone call where we're talking for 30 minutes during the day and that kind of stuff. But we've just got to be talking. I don't know how else to say it. What's going on? What are some things you were thinking about? All that kind of stuff. We've never been, what are you learning in God's word, right? What are you teaching? I mean, we ask that sometimes, but I'm telling you, I'm almost embarrassed how little we talk about that. Obviously, if one of us is going through an emotional season or situation, we certainly go deep and talk about that stuff. But I would say, Andy Stanley said years ago about the small, consistent deposits of time.
Yeah.
And I would say if there was a quick way to say the strategy that I feel like Jackie and I try to implement in our marriage, it's small, consistent deposits of time. And that seemed to have worked really well for us.
I love that. That's really, really good. Yeah, it is. It's a volume game, and it's a compounded game, just enough over time. You host two podcasts, Better Man and How to Lead. Will you tell us a little bit about both of those?
Yeah, Better Man's a ministry that was started by Robert Lewis a few years ago. They are creating some phenomenal curriculum for men, and men that are considering faith, or men that are following Jesus, regardless of where you are on the faith journey. You'll find a lot out of that. Robert Lewis started that ministry really decades ago. That's kind of his mark, is the way he was pouring in to men. So they've got curriculum that they run through local churches. So the curriculum and all that stuff is essentially free to churches, to bring it into their churches, to gather men. So they probably wouldn't like me saying it this way, but if you think about it as a men's ministry in a box almost, and again, that's a very oversimplified way of saying it. But if you're at a local church and the thought of starting a men's ministry feels a little daunting, well, Better Man, it's kind of all right there for you. And all you got to do is just gather some guys, and there's some videos you can watch, and things, little books that you can download, and notes that you can take, and all that kind of stuff. They're just facilitating conversations on really important things about manhood. So, so their podcast, we do things like this. You've been on the podcast, right? You and Heath were on the podcast. We just talk about issues that hopefully are relevant to men. And then How to Lead is with, again, one of our friends, Clay Scroggins.
Yeah.
We just get together and riff on some different things that we're thinking about and seeing out there on the leadership journey. We try to do that really, really short. We try to do, 15 to 20 minute episodes. And so
those are fun. I mean, those are a lot of fun for sure.
He's a character and is worth listening to. You'll tolerate me just listening to his little quips and the way he talks and all that he does,
so
and his insights. It's just like, I don't know how a guy can be so funny and goofy and so insightful at the same time. So,
I know it. It's amazing.
Yep.
So I actually have two questions. One I prepped you for, one I didn't. Here's the one I didn't prep you for. What are with your boys? What's a movie, you guys? What's a movie maybe you've introduced them to now that they're getting a little bit into adolescence, a little bit more mature? What's a movie you guys have watched recently or in the last year or so that's been fun?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the movies that, like, one that we talk about a lot, and man, this isn't recent though, so I feel like I'm cheating, would be Hoosiers. Right. We talk about Hoosiers a lot.
So good.
That movie, and it still works, man. That movie still works. So we talk about that. We all as a family really liked the Top Gun Maverick this summer. So that's one that we've talked about. Maybe one of my proudest moments as a dad, though, is my 12-year-old and my 14-year-old starting to get into it, but my 12-year-old would watch Seinfeld every single day. And Joey, and you'll appreciate this, he doesn't just laugh. He is learning how to bring those jokes into his real life, man. And that blesses me to watch him do that. So
he's one to watch that. He's one to keep an eye. If he can appreciate that, that's so good.
Yeah. So we watch a lot of Seinfeld. We just skip around. Obviously it's great on Netflix. You just skip around.
Yeah.
I'll think of an episode and be like, oh, we need to watch the one about the bike when Newman said to cut it in half. That was great because he's got this poster of butter. We stopped it in Newman's apartment for about 3 minutes. And it was like, Josh, just look at all that stuff. And all the ridiculous stuff in Newman's apartment, he was rolling. It was so
Oh my gosh. So good. And great call on Hoosiers, by the way. That's a top fiver for me. That's a great one.
Sure. Which one for your family that you all have seen recently?
Oh gosh. I didn't expect the turnaround. My son and I his love language is watching movies. I know they say there are 5. There's a 6th one, which is watching movies. And we're going through, we put a list of like 300 movies together, and it spans of ones that we want to watch together. We watched one that just comes to mind. I love the movie Spy Game. I don't know if you remember that with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt. We watched that one the other day. That's a great one. And there's some more we're going to keep working through. I haven't gotten them to, there's still some that are a little bit off in the distance. They're probably, 18 plus, a little more the lowbrow comedies, but that's been super fun to do that.
He was at a buddy's house recently and they went a sleepover and they texted and they were like, can the boys watch Dumb and Dumber? The 14-year-old, can they watch Dumb and Dumber? And I was like, I want to be there for that first experience, but of course he can watch Dumb and Dumber.
Such a good one.
There's some of those lowbrow comedies.
Yeah.
There's a few of those that are coming up. Yeah. Probably not the 14-year-old. We're not watching Apocalypse Now this weekend
not quite
or
ready.
Anything like that. We're not ready for that one yet.
So we hear the Aro Podcast is all about conversations with people who strive to live intentionally. So what is that word? What does intentionality mean to you?
That was, and I'm glad you gave me a heads up on that because
we'd have been in trouble.
So basically I started trying to answer that and I felt like I was in a journal. It was, I don't know how to answer this. So I'm going to write down a bunch of things and hopefully I'll just find a point in all of this, but it's gotta be, my answer has to be somewhere in some of the stuff that we've been talking about. And maybe that second point that I referenced on what it takes in the valley, that idea of control. Shifting from that victim mentality to that sense of personal agency and taking responsibility there. If I think about seasons of my life where I've lived intentionally and then seasons of my life where I wasn't, I really think those seasons where I wasn't, I had just given up. There was a sense of, I'm a victim. I've got all this stuff around me. Oh Lord, come help me because I can't do anything, and reading the Psalms, all good, great stuff. incredibly important, but there was always something that I could be doing. There was always something. And if I was going to say if I've been living a season of intentionality, I think it's really just searching for those things that are within my control, and just staying focused on those and not worrying too much about the things I don't control, and just keep that list laser focused on, okay, what do I control right now? And that's everything from, so what do I control with my wife? I want a great marriage. That's it. That's a strong desire. I want a great marriage, but I don't control her. And so what can I do? I can initiate, I can share, I can be vulnerable, I can confess when I have wronged her. Those are things 100% in my control. And so I need to do those things. I want a great relationship with my kids. I don't control them. What can I do? I can initiate. I can ask them to go play golf. I can go play sports with them. I can go watch them. I can try to engage in conversations. That's all I can do.
Yeah.
and that to me, I think right now would be my answer on what it means to live intentionally, would be just staying laser focused on what I control.
That would be a game changer for all of us if we just focused on that. Don't worry about the other stuff, just what we can control. And then I bet you a lot of things that we couldn't control previously would then come in within our control.
It starts coming over and you're going, all right, that's what I was looking for. And
Adam, people will want to go to your website. You said earlier you don't need to buy the Edge. I'm going to disagree with you there and say people do need to go buy the Edge. It really is good. It's very, very practical. It's probably an annual read. It's one of those where it's just good reminders you need to have. So please do, people listening, go buy the Edge. How else can people go connect with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, AdamTarnow.com, TARNOW. But I did buy TARNO.com as well, because it's often misspelled. So it'll still get you there.
Smart.
But AdamTarnow.com. And you'll see things there where you can sign up for an email newsletter, connect on LinkedIn, buy the book, all that kind of stuff. But or you can just reach out to me straight through the website. But this has been awesome. You have been so kind. Phenomenal questions. And maybe it's just because I know how hard it is to host, but Joey, you're phenomenal at this.
Oh, you're nice. Too nice.
So this was a great conversation. Our hour flew by. So thanks for inviting me on. This was really fun.
Man. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for being generous with your time, your wisdom. Had a ton of fun. So thank you, Adam. Everybody go check out AdamTarnow.com.